colleagues, we are going to our second part of the occasion. Our guest speaker is Mr. Garbett, Managing Director, Professional Aviation Services Pty Ltd. I'll give it to you so that you can tell us about your business.
Well, I'd like my talk to be as interactive as you would like to make it. I'm happy to take questions at any time. I'm happy to discuss any particular point that I may make. So if you just indicate to me, because I've got my back.
Okay, no, that's fine.
I've got a story to tell, but I need to give you a little bit of background before I get to the nub of what I'm trying to get across. I've entitled my talk, Business and Love. I think you'd enjoy it. I've done this so as to be certain that you will stay awake until I at least reach the love part. My name is Bob Garbett. I'm CEO of Professional Aviation Services, established in 1979. We employ around 400 people, mainly in the logistics and cargo security fields. I'm an honorary director for life of the Commercial Aviation Association of Southern Africa, a life fellow of the Institute of Directors, and I serve on the council of the Johannesburg Chamber of Commerce. I thought it would be of interest, as I've already said, to provide you with some of my business background to illustrate that I speak from varied and sometimes painful experience. This will lend credence, I hope, to my later advice. I started my career in 1965 after my national service in the Army and a short stint on a drilling rig as a wharf clerk in Cape Town for one of those old-fashioned, almost Dickensian clearing and forwarding houses, as they were called then. This was before containerization, which made the Duncan docks a very, very exciting place. The smells of the world were everywhere. I am ashamed to say, although I had no qualms at the time, that bribery, the word corruption was not really used in those days, was part of my job. When the mail ship arrived, I was given 30 rand, quite a lot of money in those days, with which to ensure that our biggest client got the fastest possible ex-docks delivery of their merchandise. The rand, 10 rand went to the stevedore, 10 rand to the wharf foreman, and 10 rand to cartage. It was easy to recognize the wharf foreman, as almost all of them had fingers, hands, and even arms missing. They had come through the train shunting ranks, a very dangerous occupation. It was at the time of decimalization, and as my name is Bob, the wharf foreman inevitably shouted when I arrived at the wharf, "Hier kom 10 cent alweer." A bob, of course, was the popular name for a shilling. I was picked, these days you call it headhunted, which meant something entirely different at that time and occurred in Borneo, by an associate of the clearing and forwarding agent in Johannesburg, MIC Kaplan, to head up their aviation division in Johannesburg. I was, a few years later, given the greatest gift that God has given any man. I met my beautiful, charming, exceptionally intelligent, wonderful wife, Christine, who would have been here today, but she's undergoing a minor operation at the Donny Garbett clinic, to whom I've been married for 35 years. Christine had started a small aircraft sales company in which she was very busy, had no debt, but made little money. I came on board, and together we really stirred up the market, being the only non-dealership at the time to sell corporate turboprops and jets. Christine is the main brain in our business. Christine's second most honorable trait, first being a loving nature, is modesty, which I do not share. She is one of the few women in the world to have flown alone in single-engined aircraft to Europe 7 times. This against the background of arriving in South Africa by ship, because she was originally scared of flying. We concluded a partnership with the Stocks and Stocks Group in 1997 and purchased, with their money and our aviation experience, a company owning a number of aircraft, including 4 turbine DC-3s, which is the old DC-3 that had been upgraded to the tune of some $2 million each, with turbojet engines, extended fuselage, modern avionics, and so on. Our most important life experience, and perhaps you could call it moral lesson, began at this point. This being my, and of course I always include Christine in my powerfully hard development period, or PhD. By the way, I did a little research on what a PhD entails. An academic put it this way: a PhD is less like hacking through the jungle with a machete, and more like crawling around on the ground with a magnifying glass. Less major discovery of new lands, more painstakingly detailed investigation of familiar ones. Back to my PhD. We had dissolved our JV with Stocks and were left with full ownership of 1 turbine DC-3, valued at around $2 million. The aircraft was unfinanced, although everything else we had was financed to the hilt. We managed to negotiate a contract in Kenya. The contract was very lucrative, and our tails were right up in the air. Now, let me tell you, aspiring achievers, business life has a way of building you up and then giving you a firm clap. It is the clap that is the most important part of the life exercise. It is only from the clap that you learn your real strengths and weaknesses, and of those around you. It is from the clap that you develop the most important part of your makeup. I deeply believe that reliance on God in these circumstances is the vital element that gives you the strength not only to survive the clap, but to enhance your spiritual well-being and indeed your business strength and confidence. We were contacted in 1998 by a registered exporter of cigarettes who was authorized by the Rothmans Group to export cigarettes into Africa. They asked whether we would deliver a consignment to Beira in Mozambique en route during the positioning flight to Kenya. I contacted the client and told them it was their lucky day. They were paying for the ferry of the aircraft from Lanseria to Kenya and would therefore enjoy income from the cigarette consignment. I think the amount was around 30,000 rand. We waived our most valuable asset, bon voyage, as she took off from Lanseria Airport after the aircraft had been loaded under customs supervision. She also carried spares for the basic maintenance during the duration of the contract in Kenya. The next day, we received a shock call from Mozambique, from an organization known as the Crown Agents, who have a checkered reputation going back over 100 years in England and elsewhere. They were in Mozambique to train Mozambique customs. The British accent told me that they had detained our aircraft, but not to worry, as if there was nothing amiss, the aircraft would be released shortly. This went on for days, which turned into weeks. We supplied all the documentation that they requested, which was all 100% in order, including documentation proving that the cigarettes had been exported under customs supervision as they were excisable in South Africa. We produced the pre-flight clearance documents, which gave the details of the aircraft and the cargo, cigarettes of course, time of arrival, names of the pilots and so on. This information had been faxed to Mozambique prior to the flight's departure. It was based upon this information that we received clearance from Mozambique to overfly their territory and land in Beira to discharge the cargo. The detention continued. There was no due process or hearing, and no reply to correspondence, some of which we had translated into Portuguese. A little aside at this point, which will demonstrate, I hope, the importance of imagination and lateral thinking in whatever you do. Planning for the 1998 Aviation and Defence Show, the largest in Africa, I looked at the moon and suggested to Christine that we exhibit a piece of the moon. She thought I'd flipped. We signed a contract with NASA which demanded tight security, sent a courier to collect the moon rock from the USA, which arrived amongst great fanfare. TV, radio, and the other news media met the arriving aircraft. We coined the phrase, traveling through space, our business. We received a call from Madiba's office. They mentioned that Madiba had shown interest in seeing the lunar rock. We had the privilege and honor of meeting the great man twice at his home, once with the rock and the second time to present him with photographs and other memorabilia covering the momentous occasion. A colour photograph of Madiba holding the moon rock appeared on the front page of the Star. We exhibited the space relic at many schools and other venues. Incidentally, I had met Madiba some months before. He was coming out of the toilet at Lanseria Airport. And I said, "Sir, can I shake your hand?" He said, "No, yes, you're going to shake my hand." So what I tell people is, I shook his hand soon after he shook himself. We eventually travelled to Mozambique, appointed a Mozambique attorney. It was then that the true motive of the detention became apparent. The scourge of Africa raised its ugly head. To be fair to the Crown agents, I do not think it was their motive. Theirs was to produce a badge of success and hang on to it at all costs. But the motive of the Mozambicans is really what I'm referring to. We were told by the attorney that a 20,000 rand bribe would release the aircraft. Christine and I debated our position, gathered our strength, prayed, and told the attorney that under no circumstances would we pay any sort of bribe. Please understand, ladies and gentlemen, that our financial future was on the line. Remember that the aircraft was valued at $2 million US, insured, by the way, for $1,800,000 US. We had heavy bonds on almost everything else we owned. I must admit, at this point, if it had not been for the support and strength of Christine and our belief in God, I may have cracked and paid the bribe. The backwards and forwards with the Crown agents and the Mozambique authorities went on and on, often interspersed with various individuals in Mozambique and in South Africa, assuring us that the payment of $25,000 and up to $50,000 US in some cases would secure the release of the aircraft immediately. We were even told that our reputation for not paying bribes was well known, and that all we needed to do was to pay them in South Africa, and they would do the necessary palm greasing in Mozambique. We were adamant, and even told these middlemen that if the aircraft appeared in South Africa and a bribe had been paid, we would report them to the authorities immediately. We had, of course, the Lloyd's insurance policy, and all Lloyd's underwriters, we naively, as it turned out, are honourable. Claims were lodged through our broker, the Lloyd's agent, and of course the underwriter under the war section of the policy, as this was a confiscation claim covered by that section of the policy. We were astounded when we experienced the same backwards and forwards from the Lloyd's underwriter that we had endured from the Mozambique authorities. The shock when the underwriter advised us that they were suspicious of the whole thing and would not be paying the claim made us cold to our bone marrow. We asked for specifics and received platitudes in return. We forced a meeting with the underwriter and met them in London, with me carrying, I remember, a cricket bag full of documents so that everything would be available to the underwriter. We met in a pub and of course disclosed whatever documents to prove the legitimacy of the claim and provided whatever information they requested. We returned to South Africa and were again informed that they were not going to settle the claim. We issued summons, jumped through all the legal hoops, which drained our finances in the extreme. After 2 years, the case reached the High Court in Pretoria. We had previously sued a creditor who was due to pay us a commission on the sale of an aircraft, but reneged. The commission case appeared before Judge Brian Southwood, who our advocate told us was one of the finest judges on the bench at that time, and the case was decided in our favour. The day before the judge was to be allocated in the Lloyd's matter, we prayed and asked God to give us, if it was his will, Judge Southwood. And our prayers were answered. He was appointed. The case dragged on for days and days. The judgment was handed down, which was completely in our favour. We celebrated with our legal team and were, of course, ecstatic. I must tell you that the Lloyd's policy is a patchwork of clauses, stitched together over decades, any of which single clauses or combined with other clauses could be used to bring any claim to court. Lloyd's is something of a franchise organisation. It is the individual underwriter who decides if claims should be settled or not, and consequently, it is the integrity and honour of the underwriter on whom one relies. The Lloyd's legal nuts cracker, note plural, is sometimes used. We continued to fight for the release of the aircraft. We were in regular contact with the Department of Foreign Affairs, Trade and Industry, Transport, and even the Office of the South African Presidency and the International Civil Aviation Organization. Letters of support from many organizations were sent to Mozambique, including the Johannesburg Chamber of Commerce and Industry, the Department of Transport, the Commercial Aviation Association of Southern Africa, the Institute of Directors, and even from the local Lloyd's representative on Lloyd's paper, confirming that the aircraft, and I quote, was on a legitimate, properly documented flight. We were warned off the record by Foreign Affairs that it might be dangerous for us to travel to Mozambique, as we had stirred up such a hornet's nest. We also received a letter from the South African Acting High Commissioner in Maputo stating that he had been told officially that the aircraft would be released. The indications that only bribes would work continued. The underwriters applied for leave to appeal, appeared before Judge Southwood, who told the Lloyd's advocate, even before he had started his argument, that he was not inclined to grant leave to appeal. The advocate argued valiantly, valiantly. And when he had finished, the judge turned to our advocate and said, "I suppose you are not going to accept what counsel has just put before me." And the leave to appeal was turned down. Here again our optimism rose to great heights. But you will recall my club advice. Well, the club came. Lloyds have very, very long pockets. They decided to petition the Chief Justice for leave to appeal, which is allowed in our law, subject to meeting certain criteria and certain conditions. The Chief Justice will grant the petition, which is exactly what happened. Another 2 years passed, during which time the calls for bribes were strident. The day before the Supreme Court of Appeal hearing in Bloemfontein, we were told by one of the Lloyd's sub-underwriters that they would be prepared to offer $800,000 and were confident that they could persuade the lead underwriter to follow the suggestion. Christine and I again debated, and I must tell you, we had had many, many long hours of debate over every aspect of the Lloyd's policy and other aspects of this dreadful experience. We decided not to accept the offer and told the underwriter in writing that we had paid our premiums and had done nothing that merited the claim being turned down, and therefore we would not accept the offer. Our credit cards were maxed and our nerves were frayed. The Supreme Court of Appeal is housed in an elegant sandstone building in Bloemfontein. The court in which we appeared displayed stinkwood panels, brass rails and red curtains. By this time, the underwriters had appointed the well-known advocate, Wim Trengrove, to argue their case. Before the 5 judges entered the court, I noticed a broken chair and took the armrest over to Wim Trengrove and said, I suppose in quite a cheeky way, "I think you're going to need this." We were told by both our senior and junior counsel before the hearing that they had both seen, and I quote, "strange things happen in this court." Well, strange things did happen. The judges took an illogical line and overturned the High Court judgment, mainly for the reason, as it turned out, that they said the clause that commenced with "this policy will not apply," and the policy then listed a whole lot of circumstances in which the policy would not apply, including if the aircraft was used for an illegal purpose, the policy would not apply. It was put before the court that duty had not been paid on cigarettes in Mozambique for years. The SCA judgment, when it eventually came, concluded that adding duty to the cost of the cigarettes and transport costs would make the transaction uncommercial. Hence, smuggling must have been the intention of the importer. Their argument went that because the cigarettes, were intended to be smuggled into Mozambique by the importer in Mozambique, nothing to do with us, the flight was illegal. The cigarettes had not even been unloaded from the aircraft. The aircraft still stood in the bonded area of the airport and no customs declaration had been made. However, they said for this reason the flight was one for an illegal purpose. They also ruled that whilst the aircraft was being used for such a purpose, the whole policy, including the safety net clauses, were in suspense. By the way, both courts specifically stated that there was no evidence that we were aware of any intended illegal activity. We were stunned. We wrote to the President of the Supreme Court of Appeal setting out the inconsistencies and the many blatant errors in the judgment. He replied in polite fashion and stated that never in his career had a litigant reacted in this way. He further pointed out that once the court had handed down judgment, it could not be reversed. We decided to approach the Constitutional Court on the grounds that we had not received a fair trial, which is our constitutional right. The judges had got it so wrong that we did not receive a fair trial in the SCA. We had run out of money, and so drew the Constitutional Court documents ourselves, consulting the UNISA Legal Library for guidance. We produced 25 copies of a 60-page submission, plus supporting documents. Unfortunately, we, through ignorance, cited the Lloyd's underwriter as the respondents, rather than the Minister of Justice, which we surmised was the reason that the senior Constitutional Court Judge Chaskelson at the time, decided that the matter would not be placed before the court. The aircraft still sits in Beira, rotting away, and will cost, we estimate, at least $1 million to become airworthy again. We hold all the logbooks and maintenance records, without which the aircraft is a pile of junk. The aircraft is still on the South African aircraft register and can only be removed from the register by South African High Court order. The pressure upon us to bribe has continued over the years, the bribers voicing the same sort of refrain. We have been unwavering, no bribes. We lost many millions, but gained far more important rewards than almost any amount of money could have given us. Let me tell you that whatever your goals and intentions may be at this time of your life, whether driven by ego, financial ambition, or whatever it is, if you are fortunate, I would even say blessed, to be faced and to have experienced what we experienced, this will give you real strength and develop your character more than anything else, almost anything else could. We fought through the web of debt and depression with which we lived for years, sold off many assets, developed our business, and recovered to the point where we now own a business that employs almost 400 people. We have no debt and feel that we can look back and frankly be invigorated by the fact that we resisted the temptation. We resisted the urge, we resisted that little voice that says, so what? Get the aircraft back. Pay the bribe and you can do more good with the aircraft than without it. You have all, no doubt, been waiting for the love part of my presentation. Well, here it is. Love is the most vital weapon we all have. From love stems honor, integrity, fair play, respect, ethics, and power. Yes, power. I believe that if you practice and introduce all the aspects of love into your business and personal life with passion, you cannot fail to succeed in both. After all, our Creator represents love, and He is not only in control, but has caused and causes all positive things to happen. God guides those who ask for guidance. By the way, I'm also a member of the CAUX, that's C-A-U-X, Initiatives for Business, established in Kahr, Switzerland in 1973, and represented now in several countries, including India, which has a tarnished reputation for corruption. Regular conferences are held in various parts of the world, attracting delegates from many countries. Their credo is remaining competitive while being ethical. The chairman, Sarush Gandhi, always ends his letters with regards and love, because only love is real. Some of you may have heard the Cherokee Indian Two Wolves tale. One evening, an elderly Cherokee brave told his grandson about a battle that goes on inside all of us. He said, "My son, the battle is between two wolves inside us all. One is evil, it is anger, envy, jealousy, sorrow, regret, greed, arrogance, and so on. The other is good, it is joy, peace, hope, serenity, humility, kindness, benevolence, compassion and faith. The grandson thought about it for a minute and then asked his grandfather, "Which wolf wins?" The old Cherokee simply replied, "The one that you feed." Here are 7 summarizing points. Loyalty combined with smart thinking is always recognized. Remove the blinkers that society has forced upon you. Let your imagination soar without restraint. Believe in the God of justice, peace and love, and rely upon him for strength. You will become far stronger than you think you are. When faced with potential disaster, do not go it alone. Always encourage humor in yourself and others. Be dogged in your determination. And finally, remember the clap waiting around the next corner. Thank you for listening.
Wonderful, but not a good story to hear.
Well, it is a good story to hear. The Mozambicans have learnt, and many others have learnt, that there are people who will stand up against that huge temptation. You know, we all count our chickens before they're hatched, and we certainly counted our chickens.
Yeah.
And they never did hatch.
Yeah. We wish that it could not have happened.
Yeah.
Okay, sir?
Can we nominate you for the FIFA job?
My next door neighbor, Tokyo
It's an
Squad.
amazing story, sir. We'd like to nominate you.
Well,
It
you
is
know,
an amazing story.
we have little strength without God. It's as simple as that. You know, we think we're clever. We think we can get through life. We think we can go through life undamaged. We can only do that if we follow the principles that God has laid down for us. That's what I believe.
You need to tell something better than.
Sorry?
You need to tell something better than.
Okay.
Oh,
Simon, you're next, you know? Welcome. Yeah.
Thank you very much for the good presentation and sharing the experience with us. You know, especially in Africa, refusing to pay bribe, which is part and parcel of our culture. Is the aircraft still there now? It's still there. They're just waiting for
It's rotting away.
to write it off.
Well, yeah, it's, you know, even if they tried on the first day to fly the aircraft, they don't have the expertise, they don't have the logbooks, so it was just a useless exercise.
So roughly from the beginning to now, how many years
From 1998.
to now?
It's more than 10 years.
16
We're
years.
going to 20 years. We're going to 20 years.
But as I said, it was really worthwhile. Because, you know, words are fine. We can all utter words and say we'll do this or that. But when you've gone through it and you know that you can do it, it's a wonderful
It's an
feeling.
achievement.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
Mecca?
You know, this story is so inspiring, actually. And anybody has gone through any difficulty in life, right, will be able to relate with his story, and it will reinforce his or her will to move on and continue in life. You say something here, when you get to this kind of a thing, don't go it alone. Who do you have to go it with?
God,
Yeah, God is there.
your wife, your friends,
Support structure.
sport. You know, we are so much weaker without support. I mean, some things are just so tough to handle, and you know, many people lift up a gun and end it.
There is one guy, I think his name is Dr. von Braun. He made a very interesting statement, which is a corroboration of what you said. But that guy has an interesting story. He was one of the guys who built, he was one of the foremost astrophysicists in Germany. So he was one of the guys who built the missiles Hitler launched against the Allied forces. So eventually, after the end of the war, the Americans took him and they went to America. And he became an American. I remember a very interesting conversation he had with Jeff Kennedy when they wanted to go to the moon. Yeah, so when the Russians actually had done all that they did, so the America was a little bit scared. So Jeff Kennedy called him and said, what is it going to take to land a man in the moon safely and bring him back to Earth? That's the question. You know, land him there and bring him back. What is it going to take? You didn't ask him what are the challenges. You just asked him what is it going to take. And the person who published it said that you should pay attention to the question and the answer. So now I listened to that, I watched that, and I read it and said, what is it going to take to do that? So the guy, Dr. Von Braun, said, it's just the will. The will. So Jeff Kennedy said, if it is the will, then I have it. And that was what happened. And he went and began to convince the Congress that we are going to do it. Because it's only going to take a will. And eventually it happened. But that guy said something. Dr. Von Braun said something. He said that when you are, for you to be able to achieve something very strong, meaningful in life, you need a confidence in yourself. And when that thing becomes an onerous task, you need trust in God. You know? So I don't forget that. What you just said right now is a cooperation of something like that.
Well, thank you for
Is
saying
it possible to get this in?
I'll send it through to you.
Yes, okay.
Please, I want to.
No, sure. I'll send it
No,
through.
absolutely. Professor?
I was actually going to ask for the story here, but also the 7 principles that you read out.
Yeah.
On the Da Vinci, link, then we can actually.
Okay,
Very good.
This is a very interesting
It's a
story.
very interesting story.
But
Yeah,
I
it
can
is.
feel for you what you've done.
Yes.
Well,
You know,
you know, for some years we didn't go out because we couldn't afford to. And when we did go out, I mean, I remember going to Poston. You know, I'd forgotten, really, I'd forgotten what this looks like. We didn't go to restaurants and all that. But you, I mean, the point is you gain so much. I mean, when I look back on my life, I don't think God makes horrible things happen to you. When I look back on my life, I'm most proud of that, not achievements.
it's giving you an opportunity.
Yeah, you're right.
That you can actually succeed. And that is the way to go forward.
You're right. You're right. Wow. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have you
Thank
thought
you
of
very much.
publishing a book maybe about this story?
I thought
Write
of
a book,
I
yeah.
thought of the moon, Madiba, and Mozambique.
Yeah,
Mozambique.
Yeah.
I think it can actually make a very good film as an inspirational film that is based on a true story. I meant to film a TV production.
Okay.
So when you were telling the story, I was seeing how visually the story
It can fit me.
Really?
be told. Yeah, so I see in pictures. So it's an amazing story as well. Of courage, face of adversity, challenges. So it's an amazing story.
Well, I'm sorry Christine is not here because she is one of the pillars of strength behind the whole thing.
And the story can be used to actually deal with corruption to the lowest level.
Yeah.
Because people are struggling to come up with strategies to deal with corruption, asking for bribe and corruption. And it's a good story to tell. So this, whether the politicians are the ones fighting about it, or we ourselves are perpetrators and victims of corruption, don't give. And nothing will happen.
You're
The
right.
only thing they did is they took the aircraft. It's there. Shame onto them because they have not done anything with it.
Well, I'll tell you, we're looking at opening an office in Kenya, and one of our clients was up there and been up there for 8 months, and he told us last week he cannot stand it. He has to leave the country because corruption is so rife that he just can't do it. Now we're looking at another country.
In Africa,
Yeah, I want to do business in Africa.
Have you talked about Nigeria?
I'm scared of Nigeria.
To give an empty inner club.
That's the reason to be, that's why I was
Give an empty
to
inner
be
club.
scared.
Was it 70
I was
million?
busy
70
making a lot of
million,
money.
Are you Nigerian?
I'm a Nigerian, yes.
Oh, you sound like a French speaker.
Well, there's a lot of French in
I
Nigeria.
speak no French. I
Oh,
don't
okay.
speak any French in Nigeria. I speak Igbo language and English.
No, but they're learning French, they're not.
I'm not learning any French.
But some people are studying French.
Any more comments? Questions?
Question?
Yeah.
So, have you given up on getting the plane back? Even if it's just for sentimental purposes? But
No.
deep down.
No, I've had approaches, the last approach was about 6 months ago. I said, if the aircraft comes out, we want all the documentation, we want everything done properly, and then we'll get the aircraft out. But I'll tell you a secret, okay, which you mustn't tell the Mozambicans, please. We'd be delighted if the Mozambicans came to our port and tried to get it deregistered, because it can only be deregistered through a high court order. And if they do that, we've established jurisdiction and we will sue them. Because establishing jurisdiction with a foreign country is not an easy thing to do. We looked at that over the years as well. So it may not be the end of the matter.
May not be the end of the matter. The aircraft will not be intact any longer, or very hard to recover.
$1 million
and
to get it flying again.
You know.
And then it's probably worth about 1.8.
Yeah.
But how do you get it out? You can't fly it out.
Exactly,
The engines,
yeah,
the undercarriages, the rest of it.
How much did you spend for legal fees, if may ask, compared to the bribe that you're supposed to pay?
About, I think, 4 million, something like that.
And they wanted how much for the bribe?
The first one was 20,000 rand. And then some people said $25,000, and some people said $50,000. And they were amazed when we said, absolutely. They said, "Are you crazy? It's Mozambique, this is Africa, this is what you do." I said, "Well, we don't do that."
People are always shocked, especially if they know you've got the money. You say no. It's like,
Yeah.
why not? Why not? It's like, not even that.
But let me tell you, we'd faced it once before in Kenya. It's another complicated story. But there was an accident, and a Mr. MC Kamau, who was a Kikuyu, and he was with the CIA there, and he said, "Look, I'm going to write the report. Now, I'll write whatever report you want. I need $10,000 for it. It's not for me. It's not for me. It's for my boss." And we were in partnerships. I told you the stocks and stocks. I found Red Evidence in the chairman of stocks, and I said, "Look, we're not going." He said, "No, we don't do it." And years later, I met EFF. I met MC Kamau, and he said, "You know, we were amazed. We didn't believe that you wouldn't bribe." And you see, that's again that's filtered through there.
There's a heavy weighted question that perhaps...
I thought from academics there'd be a heavyweight question at some time or
Would be,
another.
what would the world and our continent be without corruption?
I think we would have a healthier, wealthier, and happier world.
Free education.
It would be a continent that dominates the world.
Yes. But I think we're going to see changes happening, if the world order that's kind of coming together now, and this is philosophical, it's not really in terms of any research, whatever, but maybe the world is actually getting to a point where bribery and corruption is not welcome, and I'm specifically referring to the younger generation. And you see the advent of cloud computing and access to social networks and those type of things. It's hopefully, I think that the younger generation is saying we want a happier world, and we want it without corruption.
Well, I hope you're right.
It's just a wish we want.
Well, we all have to work towards that.
Yeah, we want. But
We
there are
all
people-
have to work towards
But there are people there with mentality asking 20,000 rand for what?
No, I think corruption and bribery is just an appearance or an occurrence, and the underlying issue is greed.
Yeah,
And I think we need to deal with our greed.
which is a value
May in
issue.
our culture here, manifest in bribery and corruption. In America, it manifests as something else. In Germany, where I come from, it manifests yet different. And I think the core problem is greed.
Yes.
But doesn't it become a way of life? Civil servants are paid low salaries because everybody knows they get bribes and so on. So I mean, it's a government. That is a government issue.
Is it possible to actually have a corruption-free world? Is it not part of either the imperfection of the human nature or the failing of human nature? But the point might as well be that there's corruption everywhere, but at different scales. You get the point? At different scales. I read an article about they call it the economics of corruption, and it was the economics of corruption. If you Google, you probably will find it. I read it long time ago. It was it was talking about the corruption in Japan. Okay. So how corruption is actually far deeper than taking a bribe.
It is, you're right.
Yeah, you could see that most government policies, most corporate practices and policies, even written laws, are actually corrupt. But they are corrupted. Okay, before we even get there, there is something. There is the corruptibles, the social complexes that we're talking about. They are corruptible. You get a point. They are corruptible.
But you asked the question, could we have... I'm sorry.
Yeah. So the question we're actually talking about here, from the theoretical and philosophical perspective, if our complexities are corruptible, and the human mind and the human nature has a failing, and that failing, corruption is also at the root of this failing. Is it possible for us to have a corrupt world?
The human mind, remember that we are made by God, with as much perfection, including freedom of choice, that God could put into us. So we all know, I really believe, when we are corrupt, we know that that's not the right thing. Now, you asked the question, could we have a corrupt free world? I don't think so, of course not, because men are sinners. But we could have a world that is a lot less corrupt than it is at the moment.
Well, those are the two wolves. Which one do you feed?
Exactly.
I think it's, I mean, my view on corruption is very difficult to get rid of it. Over the years, it's just become more sophisticated. In America, there's corruption.
Of course there is.
Corruption, one high stuff.
Yeah, sure.
The first world countries, they've got sophisticated corruption.
Yeah.
Get to Africa, they're still learning, they're blatant. You get to the airport in Tanzania, they tell you there's a page missing in your passport. That's how blatant they are. But if you get to first world countries, it's sophisticated, they call it cost of doing business. Part of a transaction. Construction.
They make a negative profit.
I mean, look at the case of Enron. I mean, that was like serious corruption. Educated guys.
So the point I was actually trying to make is, how do we study the corruption in Japan? That they were corrupt and they had corrupt practices and practiced in sophisticated ways, and yet they developed. I think the corruption, if you look at Japan and you look at Germany, they are the two countries where the indigenous people are so technological and industrially advanced. America is put together for everybody. You get the point, So it is Japan and Germany where the indigenous people.
But I would suspect
so technologically, industrially, and economically up there.
I would suspect that Germany is probably one of the most corruption-free countries. I think.
Yeah, but they have some corrupt countries.
Well, every country.
There are some people that live there.
The only country in the world that doesn't have corruption, there is only one, and that's Nigeria.
No. Actually, you are correct.
It's a way of life. It's a way of life. It's not called corruption. It's religion. Can I have two comments and then we close?
It's interesting you speak about Germany. yes, corrupt. I mean, the soccer official said, well, the soccer stuff he says it was a mistake, so we call it. It's a mistake to pay so much money to FIFA. After so many years, he discovered it was a mistake.
Japan is a great example. The tsunami, you saw all the Toyota's 3 plants being washed away and there was no looting. Other nations, when you see an earthquake or a typhoon or a tornado, there are lots of evidence.
Which you must bear in mind, there are far more cameras in Japan than in other places.
But it was quite evident, the ethics are high.
It's very high.
Yeah. Colleagues, I would like to thank you for attending. Rob? Yeah. This is a token of appreciation. It's not a bribe. From Da Vinci Institute, we are saying thank you for coming and share your story with us.
Well, yeah, it's a pleasure and it was an honor to be here.
Yeah, and I hope Christian gets well soon.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Okay, very much. Okay, thanks. Thank you.